I'm Monica, and welcome back to another MCAT Master Interview. In this series, we basically just talk with MCAT top scorers so that we can find out what strategies are helping them the most in their process and hopefully inspire you as you're studying too. Even top scorers have struggled with the MCAT, but they managed to increase their scores to competitive levels, so you guys can too, and we want to show you how they did it so that you can maybe use some of the same methods. So with that, I'd like to introduce you all to Lauren Sternberg. Lauren, welcome to the series, and thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course. Well, we're so excited to get started and hear your story, but before we do, I just want to give our listeners a little bit of a background about you. So when Lauren first began prepping to take the MCAT, she initially struggled with balancing her commitments and extracurriculars with MCAT prep. For this reason, she decided to push her test date back, and unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic derailed that plan as well. By the time she was able to schedule a date, Lauren found herself testing at about 5:01 on practice exams, feeling overwhelmed with the amount of content to learn and unsure of the best way to increase her score, which ultimately led to her reaching out to us for help. So Lauren invested in sessions with one of our MCAT strategy mentors, and eventually with his help and with her own hard work and perseverance, was able to increase her score to 513 in less than 3 months. In fact, she reached the 512 mark in just the first 8 weeks of working with her mentor, and overall she increased her score by 15 points, which is amazing. That is so impressive. So in this interview, we're just going to basically dive into understanding exactly how Lauren studied, what she did to increase her score so quickly, how she scheduled her prep, what strategies she used for each section, and so much more. So with all of that, let's go ahead and get started. Lauren, why don't you just start by telling our listeners a little bit about yourself?
So I actually graduated from college in May of 2020. So by the time I took the MCAT, I had already graduated. I am interested, obviously, in pursuing a career in medicine. I've had a very busy undergraduate career. I was really involved in a club that helps students with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I am a horseback rider. I've recently taken up kickboxing. So all of these activities really kept me busy. At the same time, I was taking a full course load, but I finally made time for the MCAT, and I think it was the right pathway for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it sounds like you like to keep busy, and it's really hard to balance like a lot of that stuff with MCAT prep. So definitely like taking some time to devote yourself fully to like both different sides of your life is definitely always a good idea. So what do you think inspired you, I guess, in the beginning to want to become a doctor?
I really honestly wouldn't say there was a pivotal moment where I was being a doctor is the one and only career for me. My pathway was a little bit slower than that. I was originally, as a high school student, interested in being a vet. And ironically, I went to vet camp and I decided that wasn't for me. I was always a science person, so I knew that I wanted to pursue that route. And so I signed up for a couple of different shadowing experiences. And once I stepped into the hospital in the clinical setting, that's when I really found out that being a doctor was the career for me.
Oh, very cool. So you did kind of some shadowing opportunities?
Yeah, I've actually had quite a few different clinical experiences. I've worked in everything from operating rooms to emergency departments. Now I'm actually a clinical assistant at a podiatrist's office, so lots of different things.
That's awesome. That hands-on experience, I'm sure it was like really formative. So in regard to the MCAT, like that's, you knew you wanted to go to medical school, but the MCAT is like sort of an obstacle to getting there, at least, something that you have to overcome. So where were you in your life when you started prepping for the MCAT? Like, and how did you feel, I guess, beginning everything?
So getting started was definitely the hardest part for me. So I really love to travel. This story does have a point to it related to the MCAT. So I actually studied abroad 3 times during my undergraduate career, and I originally planned taking the test in the time I studied in Ghana over the summer for a 1-month period, and then I had 2 months upon my return to kind of get my act together and take the MCAT. So that was a full year before I actually ended up sitting for the test. So I started studying then, and then I stopped, and then I started studying again, and then I stopped. So at various different points, I always thought I had enough time, but I really wanted to give myself the most amount of time I needed to be successful. And that I know is hard to put a number on it for a lot of people. So I think pushing the test back, and when I got home from Ghana, I was just really exhausted from all of the traveling, and I still had to wrap up the course. So pushing it back was definitely the right answer. And then COVID hit. So I had forewarning that COVID was going to disturb my test date. So I was able to compensate for that as well. So even if you have to start multiple different times, it's okay.
Yeah, for sure. And like each time I'm sure you learned, a little bit more about the best way to go about it. So in regard to that like 3-month period, I guess, before you actually sat, do you think that that was like the time that you actually were kind of devoting the most, I guess, time and effort to studying?
Yeah, definitely, for sure. I, like I said, had planned on taking it a whole bunch of times, but I never really got over that hump of like from content to practice. I'm like a very one-track mind person. I really very much divided my studies into content review and doing practice questions. And in the earlier times I was set to take the exam, I never actually made it to doing any practice, which is in hindsight is probably not the most ideal way. You really want to have this integrated approach of doing content and then related practice and meshing the two together.
Definitely. Yeah, you do have to start somewhere, but definitely going to get to the practice eventually. So it's good that you kind of speaking to that a little bit. So what, I guess, was your plan when you first, for that 3-month period, what was your study plan?
So really, I didn't have like a day-to-day plan. I know a lot of people like to have an hour-by-hour block. And I knew very on that that just wasn't going to work for me because I consider myself a pretty slow reader and I really like time to absorb the material I'm reading. So I didn't like putting a number on how long I would study for something. So for the most part, I said for the first month out of the 3 months, I was going to do content review. And then for the second 2 months, I was going to do practice questions, practice tests, any kind of active learning things I could get my hands on. So
yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. So in regard to like the materials and resources that you used, what did you use for the content piece and what did you move on to then for the practice?
So I probably used, I don't know how many sources other people use, but I'm guessing I'm pretty high on the list with using a multitude of different things. So in terms of content, the Kaplan books were my primary written source. I tried the Princeton review books a little, ended up preferring the Kaplan just as personal preference, but I read all of them or almost all of them and made my own notes from them. I don't know, there's something about like translating someone else's writing and putting it in my own words and then rereading it, and it almost comes back to me a lot easier that second time. So having those was a big help for content, although it was a bit time consuming, but I did devote that first month to content. I really like Quizlet. Personally, there's a lot of like random facts, or they're not random, but they seem random in the moment when you're trying to memorize a million things. So I really like Quizlet for just running through some things. And I would do this wherever I was sitting. If I was in the car, if I was waiting for dinner at a restaurant, just having the MCAT on your mind all the time is annoying, but it does kind of help in some ways.
Yeah, definitely. You gotta familiarize yourself with everything. And
yeah, so even in like, while I was almost falling asleep, I'd be like, oh my God, what's that term? I can't remember it. Open up my Quizlet app and review for a minute, and then I'd be able to get a restful night's sleep.
Yeah, and that's better than, being stressed out about it all night.
Yeah, so having my notes, the Quizlet, things like that on hand, ready to review in my own language that I know I understand, things that I handmade was a big help for me. I know this is something I do with my regular coursework, so I was prepared to do that for the MCAT as well. In terms of other materials, anything with practice questions is great. The AAMC materials, there's obviously nothing like those. The best practice tests, the best questions in the question packs, the flashcards, I would hands down recommend all of it. In terms of the explanations, they're a little bit lacking in some areas, but I was able to supplement them with Reddit responses and Google searches and things like that. I would 10 out of 10 recommend UWorld, where the AAMC lacks in explanations and such. UWorld makes up for it immensely. The explanations are fabulous. They have these really intricate graphics, and I wish I had started using the tool my first week of studying.
Yeah, that's really good advice. We hear about UWorld a lot, so it definitely seems like a really good resource. For like those practice resources, was there a certain way that you staggered, which ones you would use when?
I like to devote whole days to certain things. I don't know, on a Monday, I would say, I'm in the mood for chemistry. Or on a Friday, it's a Friday. I really like psych. Let's do some psych on a Friday. And just like breaking it up like that. Or if I don't know, really whatever I was in the mood for, I guess. Nothing really super specific. I also like kind of reserve the right to change my mind if I was just having a bad day and I had planned to do chemistry on that day and I was dreading it. I would change it to something that I was more interested in. So being flexible with myself was also kind of a lesson that came out of this.
Yeah, I was about to say, it sounds like you're being like really flexible with your study plan. And in some cases that can be really helpful. So that might be something that, pre-meds will find that is, something beneficial for a study plan in some cases. So I guess during your studying experience, what do you think were, your biggest challenges or struggles while you were studying?
Well, my biggest struggle was hands down getting started. Like I said, I must have told my tutor, Tim, a million times that like I've done this dance before. Like starting and stopping was really tricky, not only in terms of logistics and planning to take the exam, but also mentally digesting the fact that eventually I had to take it. It needed to be done. I had to sit my butt down, do the work, and put in the time. Even though it's really hard and nobody's like a particularly big fan of taking this particular test because it is so hard, but it needs to get done. So getting started was my biggest hurdle. And the reason I think getting started was the biggest hurdle was because I was just so overwhelmed by the content on the exam. I was like panicking before I even started because I was like, how am I supposed to know 300 pages of psych while also knowing 300 pages of bio? And it was just, my head was ready to explode before I even sat down. So I definitely would say that was my biggest mental hurdle. But I discovered that working with Tim, if you just focus on like the really heavy contents, the high yield topics. After that, it got so much easier once I was able to check these huge clumps of knowledge off my checklist. Oh, I'm a master at the citric acid cycle now. I don't need to look at that until next Friday. Things like that, and just marking off the big things. And then I had time to go back and really learn the shape of molecules and things that are lower yield.
Yeah, definitely. The content can feel like so much, especially when you're first starting. So yeah, I'm sure a lot of people can definitely relate to that. And I'm glad you brought up Tim because I was going to ask about him next. So, tell us about like your tutoring experience with Tim. How did you come across MCAT Mastery and what made you want to start tutoring in the first place? We can start there.
So as we were running through my list of study sources earlier, the one thing that I didn't mention is that I actually did purchase an expensive prep course, but I really didn't end up using it. I went to a couple of the live online classes and I just didn't find it very helpful. It wasn't really tailored to my type of learning. I know that's different for everyone. I have friends that take those and love them. So I was really searching for someone to guide me through my MCAT journey. And that is really how I stumbled upon MCAT Mastery. I know like from my previous learning experiences that I thrive sitting down with like a professor one-on-one and talking out a subject. So I think going into it, I had like a clue that a one-on-one tutor would work for me. And Tim was really great. I can't say enough good things about Tim. It was really nice to have someone there to just understand what I was going through. My parents, like they were sympathetic. Whatever you need, we'll do for you. But they weren't the ones taking the test. They're not science people. So they didn't really understand what I was going through. So it was nice to have a tutor, but it was even nicer to have someone that took the test and was able to really empathize with what I was doing and understand where I was coming from when I said I was nervous or when I said hey, I don't understand this. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Can we go over this? And I would explain things to him and he would be like, you're right on, or you're really off. And just talking it out was so helpful.
Yeah, definitely. Even just like moral support sounds like was like really helpful from the tutoring experience.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
yeah, I'm definitely glad that you found that super helpful. And Tim is awesome. So that's awesome that he was able to help you. So in regard to like, I guess, specific things that what I'm getting at, I guess, is your score increase. So you did end up increasing your score pretty significantly. And some of that, is probably help from Tim, but a lot of that was probably you. So what do you think were like some of the strategies that helped you the most to get that increase?
I think it was really a combination of different strategies. I know everyone says do practice questions, but it's more than doing the practice question that I think is important. It's even if I would get a question right, it's going back over and understanding the why behind the answer choices and saying, oh, this is wrong because. That because is so critical.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was really like, it's more than just, oh, do these 500 practice questions and then you'll be all set for your 520. It doesn't really work that way. There's a lot of like mentally reasoning it out, saying that, why did I get this wrong? Do I understand? Do I need to come back to this topic? Asking yourself all of these questions is so critical.
Yeah, you want to understand it and maximize all of those questions too, because you can't retake. Well, you can, but in a lot of cases, you don't want to like retake a lot of the questions. So you want to maximize what you're using. So that's definitely good advice. Did you have anything to add to that?
In terms of other strategies, to work off of what I just said, every time I would take a practice test, I would go through it with a fine-tooth comb, make myself a spreadsheet, mark down the ones I got right, and more importantly, mark down the ones I got wrong, what topic they were, why I got them wrong. Was it just a careless mistake? Was the answer in the passage all along and I didn't realize? Or do I genuinely have a misunderstanding of the topic? So really focusing in on those practice questions. In terms of other strategies, like I said, I really liked reading the Kaplan books. I felt, although time consuming, it was worth it for me, but I'm sure other people have different background knowledges, so it might be easier for them to just jump right into practice questions and things like that.
Yeah, but everybody's different. So thanks for speaking to, what worked for you to help you get the increase that you got, because that might help somebody else who is in the situation. So moving on to your actual score that you got. So the 516, which is awesome. Your highest scores were, because you were tied, were 2 129s in Chem and Phys and Psych and Soc. So starting with Psych Soc, how did you study for that section and what advice would you have for students that are struggling with it?
Okay, so Psych Soc was my fun section. I felt like it was a break from all of the other really heavy classes. Thank God I get to study for Psych Soc. So kind of even though I'm not wasn't super excited about still studying for something, trying to psych myself up for it was kind of nice. I don't know, something different. I don't have a lot of experience in the soft sciences, so this was something fun to learn about, I guess, something different. I found Quizlet super helpful specifically for Psych Soc because it's so definition based. I found that really studying the answer choices of practice exams actually helped me quite a bit, because it's all these terms and you're basically just assembling this huge bank of terms in your head. So collecting and having a really big bank to pull from was super helpful. I find that once you have a big enough collection of terms, you're able to really zoom through those questions. There'll be questions where where some of the answer choices won't even be remotely related to what you're talking about.
Yeah, and realizing that can even, help you with pacing and other things, which is important as well.
It's nice to be able to be confident in those choices, like the others where there's more, I believe, active reasoning. Psych Soc is really easy, for me at least, to be up A and D automatically wrong. Don't even need to consider those. And that's really helpful for time management and things like that.
For sure. And you want to finish as quickly as possible. So getting those out of the way, definitely. Did you have anything to add for that section?
No, nothing in particular.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. Just wanted to double check.
I had a couple of, it was fun for me. I drew out quite a few pictures for that one. I don't know, of brains and the parts of the brain. I remember doing that. I don't know, coloring kind of took my mind off of the actual exam for a moment. It's kind of nice. Throw some fun things in there.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of people have been talking about like how drawing pictures helped them a lot on the exam, specifically with psych soc too. So it's so funny that you bring that up. And I think that is really fun and helpful. And why not enjoy it if you're going to have to like go through it in either way?
Yeah, and it was honestly nice because once I drew my really elaborate diagram that probably took me an hour longer than it needed to, I would have something nice in my notes to go back and refer to. And it sticks so much better when you make something yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Well, moving on to Chem and Phys, which you also got a 129 there. So what advice would you have for students on how to study for that section?
Chem Phys was by far my biggest obstacle. I had taken general chemistry and organic chemistry, but since then I hadn't really been in a hardcore chemistry class. So I felt like I was really unprepared. As a freshman, I didn't remember much of Gen Chem, and that's the majority, like the basic chemistry was really the foundation of the MCAT. So I was like going in and panicking a little bit about that I felt like I was behind on the Chem Phys. But ultimately, it turned out okay. So Tim was super helpful with this section. I think we spent quite a few sessions just going over big chemistry concepts. And then once I was able to master, I remember he taught me this great trick for periodic trends, and that changed my world a little bit. It was just getting these big topics down made the whole section really come together.
Yeah, even just making it feel more manageable.
Yeah, definitely. And part of it, the answer would be right in front of me. And sometimes I would be like, I know how to do this, but I'm not sure how to do this kind of thing. Piecing it all together was quite difficult. But I think between Tim and just doing so many chemistry practice questions, I was able to bring it up.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, for struggling with this section, like, you ended up doing really, really well. So I feel like that speaks to, like, your commitment.
I think when I started off with this section, it was pretty ugly, probably about 123. I got that score back and I was like, oh, this is going to need some work.
Right. Yeah. You identified your problem area and really tackled it, it seems like.
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Well, moving on to biochem, you got a 128 there. So how did you study for that section? And, you know, since it is also a hard science, did you find like some of the same strategies were helpful on Chem and Phys? Like, was there overlap there?
I think biochem was like a bit different for me than Chem Phys. Probably because mentally I was more prepared for it. I was a bio major, so I went in with this confidence that I didn't have for Chem Phys. I also did quite a bit of research during my undergrad, so I felt I had the knowledge to be able to do, like, to really comprehend the experiments that were going on. And also just by taking cell biology and biochemistry and some other challenging undergrad courses, my confidence in this section was pretty high. I felt I had been exposed. I knew about cell differences. I knew about topics in biology since I was in AP Bio in high school. So going back to this for the MCAT didn't seem as frightening as Chem Phys. However, what I did notice when I started doing biochem practice was that content is just not enough for this section. And I felt like going from psych soc, where content is a lot of it, to biochem, where content is not nearly enough to get the questions right. I found that I had to be really actively reading, knowing what causes what and how the passages unfold, and really monitoring what's going on in this biology story, sort of.
Right. So the strategies were like really coming into play.
Definitely.
Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense because, like you said, there are a lot of like, I feel like experiments and things like that you really have to pay attention to there. So
yeah, it's definitely the section that I had to be on my toes the most. I felt there was a lot of little tricks that they could get you on, not because the questions are so hard, but just because you really have to pay attention.
Right. You have to be like actively there.
Yeah.
Not like the like psych soc section for you, for example. You didn't have to be as like...
There was a pretty big contrast between those two. And even like, I don't know, it felt so much different for me than Chem Phys. Honestly, all of the sections really, I took them very differently and I studied for them in kind of different ways.
Yeah. Did you find that helpful that they were kind of distinguishable?
I mean, obviously I enjoyed studying for Psych Soc the most, and I did the best on it. So it would be great if everything were as easy as to memorize these million terms and take the exam. But at the same time, it was nice to have sort of a variation because otherwise it gets boring.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely. So you can appreciate like different things about each section, maybe.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
One, the exam is it definitely keeps you on your toes. You're never bored studying for it.
Right. There's never like a lack of things to go over.
Yes.
So moving on to cars, the final section we're going to talk about. So a lot of students actually struggle with this section. So I guess from your experience, what advice would you have for people to study for it and who might be struggling with it?
So cars was actually my lowest section on exam day, but it was also the section that I struggled the most with throughout my preparation to get a constant score. So I varied. My top score in cars was a 129. I took that exam and I was like, damn, if I did that well on exam day, I'd be so happy. But I noticed that I really fluctuated a lot in cars. But I also started off not so bad. I started off, my lowest score was 126. And I attribute much of my success due to my background in philosophy. I was a double major in undergrad, so bio and philosophy major. And I think reading those difficult texts really prepared me well for cars. So this was also kind of problematic in the end, because if I had really devoted the time to cars, I wonder if I could have achieved a more consistent score or a higher score. But in the same breath, I was so busy studying for the other sections, it kind of was nice to have one that I didn't start off so bad in. I really think the key to cracking the cars section is to do one passage, just one, every day until you take the exam. I kind of feel like I slacked off a little bit in cars because there was no content component. So it was kind of like, oh, I don't need to study anything for cars. But realistically, you do. I mean, don't let it slip off your radar.
Right. It doesn't feel as concrete, maybe, of things that you like.
The only thing you can do for cars is practice passages, which it gets rough at some point when you've already read 3 bios and 7 chemistry passages and 2 physics passages, and you just want to go to sleep and take a nap. There's cars there, and you're thinking about it, and you know you should do your extra passage, but you really don't want to. My advice would be to stick it out and do that one extra passage, because accumulating that consistency was pretty helpful for me in my studies.
Yeah, and even just like building endurance too, because the exam is
definitely
long. So you're gonna need to be able to push through.
I remember when I got my car section on exam day, I couldn't believe how long my passages were. They were the longest passages I had ever seen, and I was like, oh no. But I made it through clearly and I did decent, so I wasn't too upset. But having that endurance is a critical component.
Yeah, that was actually the perfect segue, because I was about to ask you about your exam day. So like, walk us through, your test day. How did you feel when you started, and how did the exam go?
I was nervous, but I was also excited in the same breath to get it over with. Like I said earlier in this interview, I had been waiting to take the test for pretty much a year. And I finally got to a point where I knew that I was prepared as I was going to be. So I think going in with that mindset that you can do it, and at the end of the day, it's all going to be over, and just taking the test is such an accomplishment. So although I was nervous, how could you not be nervous? There's a lot riding on it. It's a big deal. You've invested so much time in it, but it's also just getting there and taking a seat in the testing center is something to be proud of.
Yeah, I love that mindset. And you obviously didn't have any regrets. You knew you'd done as much as you could, which is a good mindset to have. So after you finished, I always love this question, how did it feel like walking out and after you finished, I guess, the exam?
So right after I finished, I was pretty fine. I was hungry and tired, but it wasn't until a couple days after that I kind of started to panic, and I was like, oh no, I don't know how I did. So it took a while, and when I finally got my score back, it was such a relief.
Yeah, I'm sure. So did you like celebrate afterwards?
Oh yeah, ordered in some Mexican food.
Yes.
It was great.
Yeah, well, I mean, you increased by so much and, you improved a lot and you got the score that you wanted to get, which is awesome. So congratulations on that, I guess. I know it's probably been a while, but it's still something to be proud of to this day.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we already talked about this a little bit before the interview started, but what happens now? So what's going on with your medical school journey now?
So I'm actually taking a gap year. I don't know if I said that earlier, but yeah, I just graduated this past May. So because of coronavirus, things have been a little bit weird. So I actually found a job at a podiatrist's office. So I'm a clinical assistant there, and I only work part-time. So my medical school applications definitely keep me very busy. So I spent most of the summer really preparing for those, writing all of those secondaries. That definitely was kind of like a full-time job. And so I'm hoping to hear back from medical schools in the near future.
Yeah, that's awesome. And good luck with all of that. That's so exciting. Now, finished with the MCAT and can move on to this exciting portion of everything.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Well, I think we just have time for one final question. So for any of our listeners out there who might be, struggling with the exam and overwhelmed, maybe they haven't even started yet, all of that, do you have any final thoughts for those students?
I know that it's really hard. From a mental perspective, it's hard from all of the perspectives that you can imagine. Just sitting down and telling yourself that you can do it is really helpful. And imagining yourself being a doctor and doing and living out the dream is kind of like one aspect that helped me get through it. I know it sounds a little bit lame, but trying to keep positive and just remember what you're working towards. I know sometimes like the application process and like all of the science heavy, really challenging undergrad courses and all of the clinical hours you need to put in, it all kind of gets mixed up and it's a lot, but just keeping in mind that goal really helps me get through it, and maybe it can help someone else.
For sure. You're working towards something, like remember what the end goal is, definitely. Well, awesome. Thanks so much, Lauren, for, sitting down and talking with me. I'm sure a lot of pre-meds and people struggling with the exam are going to find this super helpful.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, and good luck with the rest of your medical school applications. And finally, to all of our listeners who are listening right now, happy studying and good luck with the exam. You guys got this. Hey everyone, this is Monica again, and before you go, I just want to remind you that if you're not receiving our daily free MCAT strategy and success story emails yet, definitely be sure to sign up for those at mcatmastery.net/free course. In addition to that, if you feel like you might need personalized help with the exam and would like to have an MCAT mentor kind of look at your situation and help you identify exactly what's holding your score back, you can look into that too at mcatmastery.net/mentors. And lastly, and most importantly, we just want you guys to know that you have what it takes to succeed on this exam. We know the MCAT is intimidating, and when you get a score that's lower than you expected on a practice or on the real thing, it's so easy to feel discouraged or frustrated or even hopeless about the exam. We get it. A lot of us have been there. So we want to give you the guidance that we wish we'd had when we were in your shoes. And that's what these interviews are for. That's what our emails are for. We want you guys to be able to feel confident again, and most importantly, be able to see that med school admission is possible and it's not out of your reach at all. So thanks again for listening, and remember that every top scorer, every med student, and every doctor made it through this journey. So you can do it too. You guys got this.